Okay, today on the podcast, I have an iconic member of the WWF, as it was known then, industry from the mid to late 90s. He was an announcer there, Mr. Todd Pettengill. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, how are you, man? Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on.
My
There'll
pleasure.
be there'll be a lot of people interested, and you'll bring back some great memories of people's childhoods even.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that easy. I made a balls of it there, but anyway. But before you got started in the WWF, as it was known then, Todd, you were doing a lot of work in radio and stuff. What were you doing before you made it into the wrestling world?
Yeah, I was doing a radio show actually at the same time. So the entire time I did the wrestling, I was doing a radio show in New York City. I did a morning show for about 30 years. And that's how Vince McMahon heard me. So I actually called the radio station and said, "Hey, would you be interested in, trying out?" And I said, "Sure. I don't know anything about wrestling." He said, "Perfect, because I want an outside point of view." So that's how it started. I did the radio the entire time, and that's actually why I had to leave, because I was doing so many pay-per-views and using all my vacation time from the radio, and didn't basically have a vacation for about 6 years. So my wife was like, "We need a vacation." So left on great terms, and that's evident by the fact that I'm, going back now and doing some stuff. So yeah, kept very, very busy.
Yeah, and what was that call like? Did they call you directly, or did they obviously call the radio station first? But did you speak to Vince over the phone beforehand?
I did. I think I spoke with Linda first, his wife, who was
Yeah,
then running everything. And then I spoke to Vince and met him in Stamford. And he threw me a bottle of water and he said, "Sell it to me." And, that's typically you either get a water bottle or a broom in those auditions. And I didn't know that at the time, but I was happy I got the water bottle.
and you had to talk about the water bottle, was it?
Yeah, 2 minutes, sell me the water bottle. So, I mean, thankfully in radio, you're usually not at a loss for words, because if you are, it's called dead air, and that's not good. And then people tune out. So I was just like, "Oh, it's the most amazing water, this water." And it's not just liquid form. I mean, if you put it in cold temperature, it was just on and on and on for 2 minutes about the water. And he was like, "Oh, pretty good. Not bad, not bad."
Yeah. What did you make of Vince as a personality? Like, I've talked to a good few people within the business over the last year, and they say like he's the most hardworking guy they've ever seen. Would you say the same?
Absolutely. He's unbelievably energetic, I think is the right word, and goes nonstop. And really, if you think about it, took a product from his dad that was a local and regional product and blew it up to an international sensation. And you have to work 18-hour days in order to accomplish that. But anytime I saw him, he was upbeat, he was energetic, he was ready to roll, and did it all day long. So I had a great experience with Vince. He was terrific to me.
Yeah, I was actually watching an old pay-per-view the other day, and I was talking to a friend about this, but it was WrestleMania 19. And you can imagine, like I've heard from people, that Vince is get very stressed around WrestleMania time, obviously because of the production and what it is. But then I was watching 19 the other day, and halfway through the show, he's wrestling Hulk Hogan in a hardcore match. So I can just
Amazing.
imagine, yeah, I can just imagine after that match, he just goes backstage, puts on the headset, and just continues directing the show, I guess.
Exactly. He's like a robot, right? It just
Yeah.
keeps going and going and going.
Do you have any memories from working WrestleMania 9? That was your first WrestleMania, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was in the Toga in Las Vegas, which in and of itself was kind of memorable. My very first pay-per-view, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, you're in a toga." So I'm like, "Well, everybody else is too," so I didn't, feel that unusual. But it was interesting. The crowd was incredibly raucous, and I had beer spilled on me, and I found popcorn in crevices that I didn't even know existed.
And that was the first outdoor WrestleMania, I believe, as well. So it's a pretty historic one to be a part of.
Yeah, it was great. And a lot of people said, "Oh, you're in a car park in Las Vegas." Well, guess what? You're in Las Vegas. I mean, where are you going to do it? You're outside and you're surrounded by the skyline of Vegas. And it was a beautiful day. And I thought it was really, really special.
Yeah. Did you guys have a good after party that night?
Always. The after parties were always pretty good.
Yeah. Who was the best person to have a beer with, would you say?
God, there were so many guys who would, be fun to hang out with. Back in that time, basically the announcers hung together with the production staff, and the guys would do their own thing. But we would always, go out, and you sort of do a rehash of the show for those things too. So they're good on a couple levels. You can unwind, you can have a couple beers, but then you can also say, all right, what do we do better next time? How can we improve it? And, so it's a sort of a post-production meeting as well.
Yeah. In terms of us here in Ireland, we've had a lot of big wrestlers coming out over the last few years, like Sheamus and Finn Balor and Becky Lynch, and most recently now we have our first ever announcer, Kevin Egan, is doing the role that you used to do. Have you seen Kevin in action yet?
I have. He's very good.
He is very good. I think he was from a sports background on American television as well, which probably stood to him as well, much like yourself with the radio.
Right. It always helps when you have a little bit of a background. So at least you go into it with a broadcasting background, and then you have to, of course, learn the product, learn the guys, learn the storylines. But if you're comfortable in front of a camera and a microphone, it definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. He's doing it. He's doing us proud. We're flying that little flag from Ireland, a population of not even 5 million people. We're sending out some serious sports stars all over the world. So we're delighted.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. What was wrestling, the environment like in the 90s? Because you read all these things about, steroids and guys going crazy and parties all the time. Like, is it blown out of proportion, that?
Yeah, I think it is. I didn't see any of that. And
Yeah,
I guess, obviously it happened and it existed, but it wasn't something that was in your face. If you had to be looking, and we were too busy working. And, that, again, it goes through cycles with every sport, really, or sports entertainment genre. But I didn't see any of that at all.
yeah. What did you find most challenging about the role, or did you find anything challenging about it at all?
The challenge to me was always making sure I did a good job putting over the guys.
Yeah.
Because you always you hear from people that say, "Oh, that was a terrible interview." Well, if it's a terrible interview, it's my fault, right? They're wrestlers, and it's my job as the guy with the microphone to make sure it's a good interview. I always tell this story. If somebody takes the mic from me, different deal, right? Because then it has nothing to do with me. But if I'm holding that microphone, it's my job to make sure the interview goes well. That's the challenging part, right? People don't understand that. If I don't get something good out of the guy, it's not his fault, it's mine. So it's about prepping, being ready to go all the time. And if you don't get a good answer, having the next question ready to go, right? So you have to prep, you have to be ready, or it shows. I think, I've seen interviews with people who just, well, what's your strategy for the match? Well, I'm going to win. I want to win. Do you have a better question? So it's really the guy holding the microphone that's responsible.
Yeah. Did you find yourselves writing a lot of material, or did you find that maybe it was best to write out maybe bullet points and just let it flow naturally? Or what do you think was the best approach to interviewing guys?
Yeah, I tried to have, there were always bullet points of what we wanted to get in, but I didn't write anything out. I just sort of always, and having the radio background helped, I just sort of always riffed on it and sort of made it my own. And I think if you write things out and if you're reading, it seems like you wrote it out and you're reading. So it's always best to, take the points you need, put them in your own words, and then listen. Right? It's really important. I'll be watching an interview on TV and they'll ask a question like, well, where was your house located? And the guy will say, well, my house burned down to the ground. And then the interviewer will say, so what was your bedroom like? He just said his house burnt to the ground. You don't listen. So it's more important, right? If God wanted you to talk more than he wanted you to listen, he'd have given you 2 mouths in one ear. So listen. Right? You have to listen. And that's where you get the gold, because you never know what somebody's going to say.
Yeah. And speaking of what people are going to say, who did you find that was the most natural people that you interviewed on?
Well, Shawn Michaels was great on camera. Stone Cold Steve Austin was a legend on camera. There were guys that, just knew it cold and were relaxed. Bret Hart was great on camera. Most of these guys, I was very surprised, were really comfortable. And I think that's because they were playing maybe an exaggerated version of themselves.
Yeah.
And when you start with something you're comfortable with, it's always easier to be comfortable because, you're not trying too hard to be somebody else.
Yeah. A lot of people say that these days it's nearly too scripted from, say, what happens in the ring and back to the interviews. Do you find that? Or do you find maybe they could just kind of say more what they wanted back in the day, whereas you have to be kind of careful now on television what you say and
Well,
things like that?
yeah, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
in the politically correct world that we live in, you do have to be very careful not to offend somebody, but you still have to get the storyline across, right? So I don't know if it's more scripted or we're just more jaded and we're more used to, getting behind the scenes so much and seeing all this reality nonsense on TV and social media where people share absolutely every little thing about themselves. So it's kind of difficult to watch a show now and not look for that, right? So I think it's society, not necessarily anything that an organization is doing, but it's people expect so much more now and want so much more access. And it's one of those things that how do you live up to that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you do?
I think everybody thinks they're an expert these days, really,
Yeah, if you have a
I think,
microphone and a webcam, you're an expert.
yeah, I think there's too much kind of information probably out there as well. And another thing I wanted to talk about was you said people putting their personal lives out there, but one man that didn't for years and years was the Undertaker, and he lived the character for
Yeah,
all those years. What was he like to work with?
really great. Now you have to remember when you do interviews with the Undertaker, he says very little. That's Paul Bearer,
Yeah,
right? So his mouthpiece, and you could not get a better pitch man than Paul Bearer, who was a legend. But the Undertaker was, I mean, just such an iconic character. And to see him hang it up after all these years was very sad. There'll never be another one like him. There'll be somebody different, something else, but only one original taker, right?
yeah, and I think he deserves a holiday. I'd say he probably
Yeah.
hasn't taken a holiday in maybe 30 years.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It'll be good for him to kind of unwind with his life, as well, because I'm sure
Yep.
there's things he's missed out on throughout his career,
Sure. I mean, when you're on the road, think of it. These guys are doing 250 to 300 shows a year, and
Yeah.
it's nonstop and grueling, and the physical toll, not to mention mentally what that does to you. It's not an easy road.
No, absolutely not. When you went out of the business for all those years, did you watch it? Did you keep an eye on it? What was your kind of relationship like when you left?
Yeah, I touched in. I didn't obviously watch it as much, but I tried to stay, pretty familiar with it since I was, I did go back and I did a DVD for him and I did a couple
Yeah.
of appearances, and now, more recently going back a little bit more often and doing some stuff, which is fun. So I stayed in touch with a lot of the people who I worked with there, production people, behind the scenes people, and touched in from time to time. But clearly, when you're not engaged in it and doing it for a living, I didn't watch as much, but I always tried to stay, somewhat in touch with it in case I got the call.
Yeah. What way do you think that the business changed from when you were out of it to when you were back in it? Did you notice any major changes about the business?
Well, I think, like we talked about, the major change is just the perception of what you're getting from the audience.
Hmm.
It used to be, when you got a peek behind the curtain, it was a big deal. Now it's expected. So I don't necessarily think the business has changed. The production has always been amazing.
Yeah.
WWE back then, WWF had amazing production. And when you think about generating content for 120 countries every single week, and that's on Kevin Dunn, who's the EP, that's really amazing. And it stayed current. That, I think, is the most telling thing. Can you stay relevant? Can you stay current with storylines? And Vince was brilliant with that. Even back as far as, the introduction of Goldust. If you had a character like that now, I don't think anybody would really blink. But back then, that was pretty astonishing to have that character, right? And that's why I always said he's a visionary, because he was so ahead of his time, introducing these guys that you'd say, wow, how is this going to play? And then you look down the road 20 years and it's like, wow, this plays really well. You know, he was ahead of his time. So I don't necessarily think the business has changed. I think it's evolved with the times, which means it's still relevant and popular.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the characters. I do often say to people I'd be talking to on the show, I don't think these days, like, they're all great athletes, but I don't think that they have that. Someone like Goldust or Gangrel, like that character, that kind of outside persona to bring into the ring. I think it's obviously it's very wrestling based. It is a wrestling show, but I find personally from looking at it sometimes that there's not enough development in the characters. What do you think? Or
Yeah, and I think that's about time, right? It's about having the time to tell the story. I think there's some of it, but you have to remember people's attention span has gotten shorter and
yes,
shorter and shorter. And the deal we used to say in radio is if you don't catch their attention in 3 to 4 seconds, you've lost it. They're on to the next thing. So
yeah,
now people are so obsessed with headlines and give me all the information right now. I don't want to wait for anything. If you want to watch a show, you go to Netflix and you watch it all. So people are used to not waiting anymore. It's really difficult to try to tell a story, have peaks and valleys when people want it all right away.
Yeah, I think something that didn't help recently was obviously something out of the control as well. It was the lack of fans. Now, I've watched a lot of sports, even over here. We have football and things like that. But wrestling without the fans was not the same at all. Now, it was great what they'd done with the Thunderdome. That was, of course, ahead of its time as well in terms of production and everything. But it's great to see now, obviously, over the next couple of weeks in Texas and Florida, we're going to have some fans back on the screen. And I think that'll make a huge difference.
Oh, it'll make a huge difference. I mean, that's what, as you said, any athletic competition, you talk to anybody involved and they'll say they miss the fans, right? But what do? You have to adapt and overcome. Worldwide pandemic is out of your control, right? Nobody saw it coming. Nobody imagined that in our lifetimes we would experience something like this. So when it happens, what companies can survive? And you see a lot of them that are out of business. But I think thanks to Vince and Kevin and the leadership at the WWE, they survived it, and you just do the best you can. And people expect that there's going to be bumps in the road, but now that the live tour has been announced for this summer, I think we're finally getting back to normalcy. People are getting vaccinated, and hopefully we'll have a normal life again very, very soon.
Yeah, what's the feeling like in America? Is it a feeling of kind of positivity now heading into the summer?
Yeah, I think so. It's much better than it was. I mean, we went through this, it's been over a year. I mean,
Yeah.
people are losing their minds. So I think you're going to see at every event, and not just wrestling, but maybe especially wrestling, you're going to see fans come out in absolute droves like you've never seen before because people are dying for it. They want it so bad, that interaction, that human connection, what we've all been missing. You can't get it on a screen. It helps, it's something, but you just can't. I mean, having a beer with your mates is now a big deal, right? I mean, you take those things for granted, but it's like, man, do I miss doing that?
Yeah, in Ireland here, we're still in the longest lockdown in Europe, so our bars aren't open till they're actually open next week, but only for outdoor service. And I don't know if you know about the weather in Ireland, but it's not too good.
Yeah, a lot of rain and wind, right?
Yeah, so it's going to have to be it's going to be an interesting summer anyway if we have to try and drink our beers outside.
You have to get a lot of rain gear, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
See, you should invent some sort of cover for the beer, right? I mean, you could be a multi-billionaire. Just some sort of flap with access. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, maybe some kind of cup with a straw, but it wouldn't be the same though.
No, it wouldn't be. No.
If you were trapped on a desert island with 3 wrestlers, who would they be and why?
Well, current does it have to be active?
It can be anyone you want.
Anyone I want. Okay, so number 1 would be probably Mankind. because the entertainment value would be sky high. He'd keep you laughing. He'd keep you entertained. Number two would be the giant Gonzalez, because he could reach all of the trees and pull down sustenance for us to live. And number three would be Sonny, because
Yeah, I actually met Sully. She's really lovely, and she was doing
great
an autograph.
person.
Yeah, she was doing an autograph signing in Dublin a couple of years ago over here, and there was a couple of them. Vince Russo was over here, and then Sonny was over, and she was made great time for the fans. Added
Yep.
everybody on Facebook, kept in touch with everyone. Don't think she's going through the best of times at the moment, so
Yeah.
hopefully she comes out the far side of it okay. Anyway,
Yeah, she's a good person with a great heart. And, you know, we all have these ups and downs in life, and some of us struggle more than others. But when it's public like that, and, you know,
Yeah.
nothing's a secret anymore, it's really hard. So I hope people understand that and give her a break.
Yeah, she gets like kind of a tough time off people.
Yeah.
But listen, everybody's got their own stuff to deal with in their lives, and I'm sure
Yep.
she'll be fine.
Absolutely.
In terms of coming back then last year for the bit of NXT work, how did that come about?
They just reached out, and it was, you know, the anniversary. So they were like, would you like to do some? Now, remember, we're in total lockdown, right? But I have a recording studio here, and you can do pretty much anything now remotely. So I was just recording some stuff for them, and then they rolled it into the show. But yeah, it was just the nostalgia of In Your House. And apparently I'm associated with it forevermore, which is fine with me because I enjoy it. But this year, to be able to go back live is really fun, and I'm very excited about it.
Have you guys crowds for that show?
You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really certain. I know they have the screens up there, and there are some fans, but I don't know how that's being handled.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting anyway. Would you
It
ever
definitely will.
would you ever think about returning to the wrestling business full time, or is it just something you like as kind of a outside hobby now?
No, you know, I think I would. I retired from doing the radio and
Okay.
moved from New York to Texas and have some land here and have a studio. And you know, I wanna do things I enjoy now, and the WWE is definitely one of them. And I would certainly consider, you know, doing something with these guys. But you know, that's up to them. I'm happy to play whatever bit part that I'm allowed to play.
Well, WrestleMania next year is in Texas.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm actually coming over next year for the first time. We said after all this pandemic and stuff like that, it really makes you think about things.
It
And
does.
I've been kind of putting it on the long finger. So next year, please God, if everything is okay, there'll be a big group of drunken Irishmen over there.
That's good, man. Welcome. You're more than welcome.
We'll give you a call when we're over there. You can come have a few beers with us.
Absolutely.
So, how has the last year been for you then with the pandemic?
It's difficult. You know, I mean, it's oh, human beings were not made to exist alone.
Yeah,
And that's what we've been doing, right? And even if you're quarantined with your family or someone else, I mean, it's just not natural or normal to always be together that much. And I think that puts a strain on relationships too, because it's like you again, and that
yeah,
person's thinking, yeah, you again.
yeah.
But there's nothing you can do about it, right? But I think you're going to see when everything clears up that these divorce rates are going to skyrocket. They're going to absolutely skyrocket, man.
I think so as well. And did you retire from the radio just before the pandemic, or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I was done, and I sort of wished I maybe stayed another year because it would have been at least something to do.
Yeah,
But
that
yeah,
that would have been my next question. Obviously, like you would have probably liked to have been working just to be doing something,
yeah.
because
Well,
the last year.
we have the recording studio, so we have a close knit group here, and we take on projects, and so at least there's something going on, you know, and we're able to do that. And when you have a close knit group, then you don't worry so much about, you know, everybody stays in the bubble,
Mhm.
and then you can try to get work done.
Yeah. What kind of projects are you doing if you want to tell people and we can give them a shout out?
Yeah, well, we work on a lot of music, a lot of video production. You can do, as we said, green screen. Now, this is not a green screen, as you can clearly tell. This is my. I'm kidding. Um, doesn't this look like it could be my basement office?
It's very small here for me on this screen, but
Is
I
it?
can see I can see the pictures there. My eyesight is very poor, but I think it is a green screen anyway. I'd be very surprised if it isn't.
Huh. I don't know. Well, I don't know. So yeah, we just keep busy with we're working on creating some shows for television and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's nice to be able to handpick what you want to do. Um, just have fun. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that, man, you only go around once, and you might as well have fun while you're doing it.
Exactly. I done video production in college, actually, over here in Ireland, and I was talking to a guy the other day that was in my class, and I said to him, "Man, it's like 10 years ago. We would have needed to spend like tens of thousands to have a studio in your house, and now you can almost do it like for, well, a lot less than that. It's amazing what
Yeah.
you can do from your home now."
It is. I mean, complete albums have been done in cars and released. It's amazing.
Yeah, and guys recording, like, say, in one part of the country and sending the guitar over to some other guy maybe in Europe, and he tracks the drums and then sends it back. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, they don't even meet. It's not
Yeah.
in the same room, but somehow it comes together in the end.
Yeah. Donnybrook Theatre. That's what I had written down here. I had never seen this, okay, but one of the guys, I said, "Oh, Todd's on the show today," and he was like, "Ask him about this," and I said, "What the hell is this?" And I watched it, and I'd never seen it before.
And there aren't many of them, and it wasn't picked up, but it was a lot of fun to do and a lot of work. I'll tell you, we had a blast with it, but it's one of those things that you are not the first person to ask about that.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was a lot of fun to do.
Was that your own personal project, or was it something that they had written for you?
Well, it was a combination, so they would come up with an idea and I would add to it, but it was their idea to do the show.
I think there's a small few clips of it floating around on YouTube.
Yeah, here and there, I think you can find it. Well, you found it, right?
Well, I didn't find it. I didn't know about it. I got sent it. I don't think that was it shown on TV in America?
It was.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've seen it over here.
Well, probably a good decision.
Yeah, they'll have you back on when you're releasing the DVD for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we wrap up, then, where can people find you on social media?
I pretty much just do Instagram, so it's just Todd Pettengill on Instagram. I don't really bother with the others. It's just too much. I find Twitter just to be too negative, and you have to find one and focus on it, and that's what I did. So it's on Instagram.
Yeah, so you're not on TikTok yet.
I am, but they gave me a username, so I don't even. It was like 78685. I can't, I don't do anything on it. Yeah. So I do enjoy TikTok, though. I tell you, it passes the time. It's really fun to just watch.
Todd, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Hey, man, great to talk to you. Before you go, can I ask you a question about a TV show, my favorite TV show?
Yeah.
And I want to see how it's received in Ireland. Do you know what show I'm going to say?
No.
Peaky Blinders?
Peaky Blinders is hugely popular over here.
Is it? I wondered that because it is probably my favorite show on television, and I keep waiting for the next season, and I keep checking. Not out yet, but is it as big there?
It's really big here, but it's even bigger in the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it. What a brilliant show.
My favorite show is still Breaking Bad. I don't think it can be topped.
That's a good show. I mean, there's a lot of classics, but yeah, I just wondered if that show was as big. I don't think it's as big here. Not a lot of people. I always ask, and they're like, "No, what's this show?" And then as soon as they watch it, they're like, it's the best show on television.
Yeah, it's huge over here, and particularly in the UK as well.
Awesome. Well, cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, Todd. Thank you so much.
You got it.
I'll see you in Dallas next year.
All right. Make sure you reach out.
Will do. Thanks.